Thanks for downloading the In Our Time podcast. For more details about In Our Time and for our terms of use, please go to bbc.co.uk/Radio 4. I hope you enjoy the programme. Hello. Manorbier Castle is a remote and beautiful Norman ruin on the Pembrokeshire coast in South Wales. The earliest surviving description of the building was written in 1191 by a historian who declares it the most delightful spot in the whole country, although he then admits that he may be biased since he was born there. The writer's name was Gerald of Wales, and the description of his birthplace appears in one of his most famous books, The Journey Through Wales. Gerald was a priest and scholar who worked at the court of the English king and wrote propagandist and engaging accounts of his travels in Ireland and Wales. He was the first foreigner to describe Ireland, and his vivid, sometimes grotesque and controversial depictions of animals, legends and historical events, he also wrote the first known description of a Welsh male voice choir. These make him one of the most important writers of the Middle Ages. Many of his works are still in print today, more than 800 years after they were written. With me to discuss Gerald of Wales are Henrietta Liza, Emeritus Fellow of St Peter's College, University of Oxford; Michelle Brown, Professor Emerita of Medieval Manuscript Studies at the School of Advanced Study, University of London; and Hugh Price, Professor of Welsh History at Bangor University. Henrietta Liza, we don't know Gerald's exact birth date, but he was born about 1146. Can you give us some idea of the historical background at that time?
Well, when he's born, it's actually the period of the so-called anarchy in England, when Matilda and Stephen are fighting for the throne, which gives the Welsh a bit of a break because Matilda and Stephen are much too busy fighting in England. But, of course, by the time he's, in adolescence, there's been a dramatic change. The throne of England is now occupied by Henry II, who's an Angevin who brings with him vast continental possessions, both in his own right and via his wife. And so the scene changes very considerably. Well, Wales again becomes an object of interest. And it must also be said that Henry II's court becomes a very glittering place to be, where there are lots of academics, so to say, or quasi-academics, politicians, theologians, all jostling for a place. So there are lots of bitter rivalries. And it's both an intriguing and interesting place to be, and also a very unpleasant place. Hell is, the court is like hell, as somebody, Mortimer, I think it is, says.
The 1066, 1146, there isn't such a gap, is there? Was there still a great overhang from the brutal Norman invasion, one of the biggest land grabs we've ever seen, takeover of official language, takeover of institutions, takeover of all the primary posts? Was that still vibrant and a sore?
Well, it's still a sore, and of course Wales is in a particular case, because to begin with, the idea is simply that there will be sort of marcher lords who will keep the Welsh in check. But of course this doesn't quite work out, because the marcher lords themselves then think, oh, actually we'll go and conquer a bit of Wales. And then they get, as you might say, overmighty subjects, and the king wants to intervene and make Wales his own. And Henry I has a very aggressive policy towards Wales, and even introduces Flemish settlers to try and sort of dilute the native population so that he will have more of a hold. I'm sorry?
You mean genetically?
Yes.
Really?
So that adds to the sort of mix. And of course also, I don't think you can really talk about Wales any more than England as one country. I mean, Wales is also divided itself among a number of warring princes. But a leading Welsh prince gets killed in 1093, and that sets in a train of considerable sort of bitterness.
Gerald was born in Wales, but spent a lot of his life working with the English kings in England. Can you just tell us a bit more about the relationship between Wales and England then? You've talked about, I like the word hell.
Well,
I'd love a bit more about hell.
It's court that's hell. Well, I think it varies very much. But I mean, if you think about what a mixed situation it is, just think about Gerald's grandmother, Nest, who was obviously a very remarkable woman, who is the daughter of this lord or prince who's been killed in 1093. She is then married to a Norman castellan of Pembrokeshire, because Henry I has tried to turn Pembroke into a sort of English county. But not content with this situation, she then is abducted by another Welsh princeling. She becomes also the mistress of Henry I. She then has another liaison with a Norman constable, and she also has a son by...
Are we doing a programme about the wrong person?
a son by a Flemish, one of these Flemish settlers. So she has altogether, I think, 8 children and 2 daughters. And so Gerald, because this is his grandmother, whom he knows, Gerald is connected with sort of everybody who's anybody in Wales. And of course this family are then going to go on and be the people who conquer Ireland. So, as ever in the Middle Ages, we're talking about families just as much as we're talking about the Welsh or the English.
And he revolves around his family to a great extent, doesn't he?
And Nest is obviously quite somebody.
Yeah, I didn't realise she was that quite a somebody. Right. Michelle Brown, can you tell us about his early life and education? Calm the thing down a little.
Well, I think the Helen of Wales, as Ness was known, sets the trend. One of her daughters, Anne Howard, is Gerald's mother, and I think he from a very early stage he seems to reflect a whole series of diptychs and dichotomies. He's a little bit like Bernard the Irishman, as George Bernard Shaw was sometimes described. When he's out of Wales and at the English court, subsequently he's known as Gerald the Welshman, and when he's actually at home, he's Gerald the Englishman. And so you begin to pick that tension up from quite an early age. He tells us that he always shone forth in the family, and he never quite wanted to engage in his brother's rough and tumble military games. He was the one who was singled out by Anne Howard and her brother, the Bishop of St. David's, for greater things. He was going to be the churchman. He was the one who was surviving the taunts of his peers and cultivating this inner light.
He says that while his brothers built sand castles, he built sand churches.
That's right.
We believe that.
Gerald did. And he's packed off to study with the Benedictines at Gloucester, and he has a few nice things to say about them. He didn't think they were the most imaginative, but he got a good grounding. And then, of course, he heads off to Paris in his late teens.
For quite a while, isn't it?
Yeah, about a decade. Imagine spending your 20s in Paris at that time.
Yeah, well, this is important because the Benedictines were powerful. We've got a time when the universities and the monasteries are coming through with education. There's serious intellectual change going on, and he's there. Could be called one of the centres of it in Paris. He stays for a long time, nearly 10 years. He must learn a great deal. He does the trivium there. Can you just flesh that out a bit? Yeah,
OK, so this is the time when the cathedral schools, Ewyas, Saint Victor and others are really beginning to get a little bit of scholastic incision in thinking. Not empirical thought, but very, very rigorous courses of study that will result in the formation of the universities of Paris, Oxford, etc. And so Gerald is being taught by the leading intellectual figures of the day, and not only being taught, but rapidly making claims that he's able to teach as well. Are they claims substantiated? I mean, can he, or are they just claims? No, I think there is enough to actually say that, yes, he is. Certainly at a later stage in his career, when he returns to Paris, he's actually teaching at that point and talks about filling lecture theatres, people flocking to hear his works and erupting into spontaneous applause and praise at the end of it. It is his book, isn't it? It is his book, yes. So, yeah, we take that with a large pinch of salt, but certainly does seem to have been very well thought of. And we know also that he was buying second-hand books on the Parvis in front of Notre Dame de Paris. That's rather touching, isn't it? Yeah, very proud of his book collection, etc. So yeah, he is emerging as a known international figure. He would have been recognised.
So he'd come back from Paris thoroughly and rather thoroughly well educated, more than most of his peers. We're still in an age of thugs, aren't we, really, who are running things on the whole?
Yeah, I mean, the schools of the monasteries, etc., had a good reputation, but he's cutting edge now, and he'll have acquired that sort of veneer of French je ne sais quoi as well. So he's going to be quite a sophisticated figure, one would imagine, by this period.